Okay, let's do it.
Hey, welcome everyone. Happy Sunday. How y'all doing? So while we're getting started, we got some music to help us chill out, and I'd encourage everyone to take a moment and, if you like, use the three dots at the top right of your picture to add your preferred pronouns to your screen name and also your location, wherever you are in the world. It's always nice to see where folks are hailing from when they enter into this room. I also hope, if you haven't, take a moment to grab yourself a refreshing beverage, whatever it is that, will help you to stay happy and focused. Soft drink, hard drink, something else entirely. I always think that a little whiskey at the beginning of an event is a good thing, though it's also evening my time, maybe it's morning for some of you, so that might not work as well, but. And once you've arrived and you've added your preferred pronouns and your location, feel free to add into the chat what brought you here today. What's one thing you're curious about?
I love Zach's chat.
Zach, yeah, we've got some peanuts at the bar. Studies have shown that the peanuts that are at a bar often have a very high uric acid content because of people making trips to the restroom. But the good news is that that stuff doesn't travel over Zoom so well. Exactly. There's a pretty funny Mad magazine comic about that, but it's too hard to explain. That's the thing about comics, much easier as an image. So for the newcomers, feel free to add your preferred pronouns and your location to your screen name. You can use the three dots at the top right of your picture to do that. And then once you've done that, I just asked everyone to check in and put into the chat what brought you here or one thing you're curious about. Hey, Eric. How's it going? Taylor, Louisa, Ingrid, Mindy. Alan, I didn't know you're in Berlin. People are moving locations.
Yes, I am. I'm in Berlin.
There you go.
And you're still here.
I'm still here. Lockdown.
Yes.
Okay. So, great. Well, we'll just give it another moment for anybody else to show up. I see Anne and Peter and Rajutha and other folks showing up right now. Again, hi. Nice to see you, Anne.
You too, both of you. Hey.
Hi.
Kalaija, hey. Hi, Emily.
So as I mentioned, if you like, feel free, Anne and other folks who are just arriving, feel free to add your preferred pronouns to your screen name and also your location if you like. And then I just asked everyone if they like to put into the chat, take a moment and add what brought you here today or what's one thing you're curious about. Francesca, nice. Sociology meets art. Good question. Well, I'm gonna get started because it's 5 minutes in, and we're chill. Hopefully, everyone has a kind of cool or warm beverage with them. But welcome to the first present of 2021, and I'm Prem Krishnamurthy, he, him, and how many of you actually? I mean, I know a lot of you, obviously. Some of you I don't know. But how many people here have been to a present before? Raise your hand physically or, in the chat. Have we? Okay, so we've got some regulars, as it were. We've got some new folks too. That's cool. And that's always the nice thing, is that different people are arriving who have different experiences with that. I mean, so some of you know that Present has been going since March 2020. So it's almost a year, which is a little insane. I mean, it says something about this year that's behind us and how we've had to readjust some of our habits. Oh, Ingo Gunther. I haven't seen Ingo in years. See, it's nice that he's sending folks over to Present. Nice to see you. So, I mean, for those of you who are new, just a brief recap is Present started in late March of 2020. Emily Smith, who's here with me, we started this together, and it was a weekly event that then kind of started out for 6 weeks, happening every Sunday. And it involved a host of guests from all over the world. And then it kind of changed rhythm and became more sporadic. And then last fall, it was sponsored or presented by Front International 2022, and it happened once a month. And now, I mean, I sometimes keep wondering, like, what if Present, I mean, Present has been an event that's happened on Sundays, but I sometimes wonder, like, what if Present weren't an event, but more like a place? A kind of space that people could go whenever they wanted to, or that had particular opening hours, and where they could hang out with people they already know, but also maybe meet some others that they don't. And I mean, this is related to something that I have been really concerned about since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. And that is how, it's a public health crisis in so many levels. And one of those is the way in which, we've lost a sense of what is a public space. What are the spaces in which people who don't already know each other come together? I mean, I think that one of the things the pandemic has done for me, I don't know how many of you can identify this, but I mean, I'm much closer to my closest friends and family than I was before the pandemic. I mean, how many of you feel like you've kind of actually are closer to some folks? Yeah. But on the other hand, I mean, the thing that I see some raised hands physically and through the interface. But then on the other hand, you have all these people who you aren't running into, people you aren't seeing on the street, the so-called weak ties that often kind of help in our lives. And there are lots of studies that show that people with lots of weak ties actually live longer. And, all of these reasons for how these more happenstance encounters are really important. And, years ago, my friends Evelyn Burnett and Mordecai Cargill, who are based in Cleveland and run something fantastic there called Third Space Action Lab, they actually are the ones who introduced me to sociologist Ray Oldenburg's idea of a third place, which is going to be one of our topics of conversation today. And he introduced that term as a place between home and work. And Mordecai and Evelyn also thought of it as a place where people from different backgrounds, culturally, racially, and otherwise, could come together and feel welcome. And so, suddenly in the midst of this pandemic, I think this idea seems more and more important. I mean, we have different social media platforms, places where we might be having different conversations, but what is the community that comes together around them? What are the boundaries of them? What are the rules of them? And, these are big questions, and questions we can't hope to kind of cover entirely today, but I hope that together with the folks in this room, which already I can see represent a lot of folks who have thought and worked on these questions before, hopefully it's a chance to continue the dialogue. And so, I do count myself very fortunate that during the pandemic, I have made some new friends and people whom I've never actually met, in real life or away from computer, as it were. And one of those is Kalaija Mallery, who is our guest and also our co-organizer today. Kalaija is an artist, a researcher, a community liaison who several years ago started a space in Portland, Oregon called Third Room. And this is a kind of art space that we'll talk about presently, as it were. But, she's very interested in communities. And I had the great fortune to meet her last summer. And though we've never physically been in the same space, we started a dialogue about communities and art making and the ways in which art can facilitate a sense of community. And so then we ended up doing a project together, a kind of distributed social experiment called The Human Way. Some of you here even have a very intimate knowledge of that. And it was with about 60 people across the globe. And through those conversations, we realized, we were ending this project, The Human Way, just in the middle of January. And I thought, well, Kalaija has done so much thinking and work around third places. So I thought maybe she could join us here in this kind of sporadic community that I might call the sporadic community present, and kind of help us to think about this together. So, one thing is that, every space has some ground rules. And so let's see if this works. Do you see my screen, folks? No, you don't.
Yes, we do.
You do?
No,
Okay, well,
we did.
well, you did for a second. I mean, something's
No,
always
we
got to
did.
be. Now you do.
Yes.
Well, I just wanted to share, we can all take a moment and read over these. These are Kalaija and Third Room's rules of engagement that were drafted collaboratively in 2017. And then I believe, you'll fill us in, Kalaija, but they were written on the walls then. But we can just take a moment to read through those ourselves and take those as some sort of a starting point for our engagement today. Okay. And so with that in mind, I mean, today's structure is going to be pretty open-ended. We're going to have a conversation, Kalaija and me, about third places and their principles. And since we are a kind of fantastic size of a group right now, not too big and not too small, I'd also encourage people to jump in with questions, with comments in the chat, or raise your hand or bring yourself to word if it feels comfortable. And we'll have a little bit of time to do that. And then we'll break out into smaller rooms, because I do think that shifting scales can help a conversation, and continue to discuss some of these topics, and then regather together, convene all together to discuss. What is community online? What does it mean to gather online? What are some examples of things that work and things that don't? And what are we all looking for at this particular moment in February in 2021 in these kinds of online spaces? So how's that sound? We can do, I learned this one for a while back. High hands, medium hands, low hands to show your level of enthusiasm. Sound okay? Okay, cool. So, well, with that in mind, Kalaija, welcome to present. It's great to have you here. And I wanted to just start by, it's interesting. Like when I asked you, I said, Kalaija, what do you call yourself? And you said, well, I call myself an artist. I call myself a community liaison, a researcher sometimes. But maybe you can just what do those terms mean to you? How do you think about community liaison within the work that you're doing and are interested in?
Mm-hmm. So thanks so much for having me, Prem. I really appreciate it. I guess I would prefer to call myself a liaison over a curator or even a facilitator, because I kind of feel like oftentimes I am the handshake in between people and situations and art and people and art and environments. And I think that's really guided a lot of my interests in my practices about how I approach handling other people's work and other people's practices. I like to keep things really open, and I believe in self-created communities. So I try to facilitate without dictating or directing too much.
So, I mean,
Nice roll of tape.
on the other hand, I mean, it's true that, like, every kind of engagement or community formation has its own rules, spoken or unspoken. I mean, I showed the kind of rules from Third Room before. Like, can you tell us about what is Third Room? And I mean, how did that project start? I mean, how did those rules happen, for one thing? You always mention that they happened collaboratively, but like, what was it like? What's the scene?
Well, I guess to set the scene, I was in a grad school program that was focused on critical studies and research. And I was feeling a little bit discouraged by my experience of kind of talking about ethics and community in this very just like sterile way, where we weren't actually practicing a lot of that in my opinion. And so I sort of took to my own devices to build a project out of that frustration. Third Room is in Portland, Oregon, as you mentioned. Portland is kind of undergoing a crisis of gentrification, and sort of, as many cities are, pushing its artists further and further out of the city. So I kind of happened to fall into a 700 square foot studio that I would never have been able to afford on my own or even have been approved of by a renter. But I just kind of inherited the lease, and I decided, like, this is the perfect opportunity to try some stuff out. So a couple folks from my grad program and I sat on the floor in this sort of like empty studio, and we're just mapping out what are the things that we noticed could be guidelines for guiding conversation, or even in some cases exhibitions and curatorial practices, because I do believe that you have to have some mutual understanding of what you're getting into. So I guess that's kind of the response to the question relating to rules and structures. But like I said, it's very much a self-created thing. There's not really one thing that we wanted to make sure of, is in terms of curatorial, there's not a defining taste. It's not about taste in aesthetics. It's more of what can aesthetics do for people.
I mean, this kind of openness and the idea of a third room or a third space or a third place. I mean, you often have talked about it in terms of Ray Oldenburg's kind of ideas of that. And I'm curious, how did you first encounter that idea from sociology, and like, how did that become part of the formation of the organization?
It was actually naturally, like, my research practice is, maybe this isn't as good as it should be, but I love Wikipedia, and I kind of like was nerding out on Wikipedia about third space theory, which is the idea, that's actually, there's several theorists that have used it, but Homi Bhabha's term of sort of post-colonial identity and sort of third worlding identities. And as I was kind of combing the Wikipedia page, I saw a reference to third places, and I immediately clicked to that. I'm somebody who loves third places. I kind of spent most of my time there before the pandemic, the space between home and work. And as somebody who didn't have a studio personally, because I gave up the studio space to have this exhibition space, I actually did a lot of my personal work at places like bars or cafes. So yeah, I actually got a chance to re-dive into the third place this past month when I prepared a discussion for the Southland Institute. And that was really helpful, like sort of mapping out the characters of the third place and doing more research on, like, what is a third place actually by Oldenburg's definition.
Well, yeah, that's actually,
which
I'm curious, how many people here, raise your, like, how many people here are familiar with or have encountered the term third place before? So, okay, we have like some
Not
people,
many.
but like less than half. So maybe like, so what is a third place? I mean, in terms of Oldenburg's definition and your approach to it, maybe we can start with that.
Yeah. So third place, I'll start off by listing the characteristics that he maps out in The Great Good Place, which is his book on third places. Um, so the characteristics of third places is they're on neutral ground. Um, they're a leveler. So they kind of level people between class is what he's specifically talking about, but other identities. Conversation, there's space for conversation, accessibility and accommodation are important. There are regulars, it keeps a low profile, the mood is playful, and it exists as a home away from home. I'm gonna copy these into the chat. He kind of expands on each and every one of them in the book, but I really enjoyed kind of mapping these recently and then using those to think about virtual spaces and the ways in which these things function or maybe do not function in virtual places.
I mean, it's interesting because the subtitle of the book, I still believe in physical books. I've been hitting them hard in the lockdown. But it's like in The Great Good Place, the subtitle is Cafes, Coffee Shops, Bookstores, Bars, Hair Salons, and Other Hangouts at the Heart of a Community. Which is interesting also as a set of categories. I mean, one of the things that I remember when you were doing this conversation at the Southland Institute, 2 weeks ago or so, that came up is that many of these are private institutions. I mean, almost all of them are private businesses, but that function as gathering spaces or places where people are welcomed. I mean, is that your understanding too, Kalaija?
Yeah, what we talked about that was really interesting was sort of the link to commerce, that there oftentimes is sort of a good or a service that people go there for. And we were kind of questioning like if that was the leveling effect of it, is that everybody's there for a drink or a haircut, and that kind of creates that like buffer needed to sort of have those weak ties as you described them. I like to call them common strangers, but you know, people that you sort of see on the periphery more frequently. And then really what he also talks about is that is the backbone of the neighborhood, and how the suburban communities, especially in the United States, have sort of neglected to build in third places into their communities. So when you have to get in a car and travel, it changes it. Maybe I'm going off on a tangent now, but I feel that like I just moved to St. Louis, Missouri 8 days before, yeah, hey, St. Louisans. I moved here 8 days before the city shut down, and I have not been able to have access to a community really at all, because the third place is kind of, I wasn't worried about it at all. I was like, I know exactly what I'm going to do when I get there. I'm going to go to bars, I'm going to go to coffee shops, I'm going to just like meet people, but that sort of hasn't happened. You can really feel the effect of them when they're gone.
Well, we have a question. Alan in the chat asked about this. Would the spatial condition of neoliberalism be the creation of these third places, which then become the entirety of experience as the other two spaces, home and work, disappear? And I mean, it's a great question. I mean, one of the things that I'm curious about though too is that, I mean, I think that doesn't Oldenburg also think of historically like cafes in in older generations and kind of older centuries as being, is it entirely a new thing in his conception, or is it something that has actually existed for a while?
It's existed for a while, though he kind of frames it. The book was written in the 80s, and it really has a very 80s feel to it. But I think he's mostly thinking about like the post-nuclear family, sort of that era. But he does mention a lot of places in Europe that have roots as old as the 19th century, 18th century even. So like the banquet hall, for instance. And he's a big fan of cafes that, like, I guess Italy and France have the best third places or the best reputation, though that of course has probably changed now, as modern architecture smashes it.
Well, it is also, you're totally right to say, like, I mean, I've only read part of the book. I'm not in any way an expert on it. It just seems that he's really reacting from the position, as you said, of like the US in the 80s and the suburbanization of spaces and the ways in which we no longer kind of encounter people. I mean, but he's also pretty critical of the idea that third places could even exist online. Like,
He says they can't. Yeah.
Yeah.
He says that virtual spaces will never be third places because you can't read people through screens very well. You can't read their body language. And this was in his video interview, which I can drop in the chat for people who want to look at it later. I believe it was in the early 2000s. So he obviously, like, there was still, camera phones existed at that point, and Zoom, maybe Skype definitely existed. So he knows about it, but he still is not a fan.
Yeah, he wasn't very familiar with surveillance capitalism. Like, we can all be read online. Come on. Speaking of which, I should mention this is being recorded. I should have mentioned that before, but that is also to say this public part is being recorded. But once we go into breakout rooms, all that, whatever happens in a breakout room stays in a breakout room, just so you know. But I mean, I'm curious also, like, I mean, maybe this is a good point to think about, like, when you all, I'm curious if anybody in the audience here, I mean, do you have examples where you live of things that you think of? Go ahead. You're raising your hand, I see, Mindy.
Well, I actually just listened to a podcast with Priya Parker and Brene Brown. Priya Parker wrote The Art of Gathering. And in it, she just describes this example of a Zoom party where everyone's on Zoom on their phone and they actually take advantage of the different rooms in your apartment or house. So if you wanted to go into the bathroom, everyone had to sit in the tub, and you then played like bathroom party games like Truth or Dare or something. But I wonder if this could kind of become an interim space, even if work and home are all in the same apartment, if we could take advantage of these different rooms rather than being fixed at a desk all day.
That's a really good point.
Mindy, if you have a link to that too, I don't want to put you too much in the teacherly professorial role, but the pedagogical role, but if you have a link, share it. Folks I've never seen that. So, but I mean, that is a great point too, in terms of, I mean, have anybody here, I just encountered a week ago, the social media platform, Clubhouse. Have anybody encountered that already? Okay. Like, which is audio only, which allows you maybe more flexibility, fluidity with where your body can be. Like, rather than having to just be at a computer and have like one position, you can take advantage of like, of actually being able to move at the same time. I wanted to also just ask folks if there's other examples also that you think of from your communities that might function as third places. And okay, Francesca, thanks. Francesca has a great question. I'm stuck on the term neutral ground. Are not most spaces inscribed with social codes that mean people feel or are excluded or included, hence not very neutral at all? I'm curious what, Kalaija, I'd love to hear your response to that.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think when we're looking at Oldenburg's text that there's room for a lot of this kind of engagement or criticism of it, because it doesn't feel, in ways, it doesn't feel like it addresses a lot of things regarding exclusion and sort of what exclusion feels like or looks like in space, especially regarding like race and gender. So he does talk about class a lot, which I feel is very common from like white male sociologists from the 80s. But he does talk about class a lot. And I think that's what he kind of means in the neutral ground sense, is more, I mean, the dive bar is kind of an example. It doesn't really read neutral to me at all, but there's something about that space that people coming together around it makes it become neutral, is what his idea is. Yeah, there's no one third place for everybody, but there can be a third place for everybody. So like everybody has their own third place. I like that. Thank you, Zach. That's helpful.
I mean, yeah, I mean, actually, I'd love to ask, like, before the pandemic, do any of you all have third places or places where you used to go? Like, I know mine. I'll put it into the chat right now.
Yeah, I would love to hear other people's. Oh, it's a hotel.
Yeah, we've got the Fars Hotel, Diana Campbell Bencor. I know that the hotel very well in Dhaka. Yeah, Dantra's Bar, which is literally next door to where Emily and I live, which is this great kind of just corner bar.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Clandestino. That's true. That's true.
Mm-hmm.
Thurman's
I
Bar
love
in
this.
St. Louis.
Oh, yeah.
Revolution Coffee House in Portland.
Yeah, I think that was kind of one of my questions that I've still not settled on is third places that are not around alcohol. I mean, all of mine are bars, but a park, that's a great question. Can a park be considered a third place? We talked about this in the discussion. I feel like it can be, but maybe some of the limitations are that the environment is almost too fluid or too flexible. There's not as much of a container, but I still feel like it could totally be. I think in many ways, parks are cities' third places. It's like the only thing that they have that's public and available, other than libraries.
Well, I mean, and libraries came up in the conversation you were leading with the Southland Institute, Kalaija, but again, we can question all of Oldenburg's categories too, but one of his main characteristics is that conversation is the main activity. Like he's kind of focused on the idea of a third place. And so like a library in the classical conception is probably excluded since you're not allowed to have conversation. Bookstores. Yeah, sorry, go.
It would be interesting. Yeah, bookstores versus libraries. I mean, I'm actually in the process of building a bookshop at work right now, and I'm totally trying to kind of grapple with that. Like, how do you create a space for reading and for quiet research and work, but also a space for conversations and gatherings? But I lost my train of thought for a second.
Train stations and bus stops. That's. Yeah.
You were mentioning the conversation aspect. Another thing that I thought was really helpful, what we also talked about, was sort of the feeling. It's more of a like it's kind of a gut feeling thing, where you feel welcomed, you feel safe, you feel good to be there. And laughter as much as conversation, they say that in these third places, I think that he even at one point broke it down to like stats, where like the average American person laughs like 30 times a day, which is I don't know if I laughed 30 times a day in this last pandemic year, but the average person laughs 30 times a day. And then in third places, their laughter is 140 times within an hour. So it's just like very joyous, boisterous conversation.
Right. I'm not finding the exact quote, but that's totally right. Right.
I'm reading the chat right now.
Yeah. I mean, it's fantastic to hear people's thoughts on that. And Alan mentioning all of these different places that different people gathered. Back alley as the third place. I mean, one of the other things I think in the context of the original writing of this was also that, like, for him, a lot of so-called third places were quite humble or modest spaces. They weren't architecturally, kind of mind-blowing or significant. They actually, it was like less about their substance than what they facilitate.
Right. Yeah, the keeping a low profile, that's kind of one of the challenges of galleries being third places, in my opinion.
Yeah.
uh, they don't really read as low profile often. I mean, the ones that do tend to be more like third places in my experience.
Yeah. And I'm hearing
Mm,
we have here lots of interesting Viennese examples. Thank
mhm,
you for those. The coffee houses, communal tables for reading,
mhm,
the National Library.
mhm, mhm,
So, I mean, I think that in some ways, part of the challenge, and this is what why why we decided to organize this today, was also to think about what are the possibilities, or where are people finding the things that the kinds of connections and the kinds of contexts that we used to have. I use we maybe in too large of a sense, but let's say that I think that folks used to be able to experience in physical interactions, and what are the things that maybe are there things that are filling those spaces, that are taking up those kind of filling those gaps. And so, I mean, I thought that it might be, we wanted to kind of change scales a bit here, because that's also one of the things, like in my maybe too utopian idealized idea of a third, like a bar or a third place. It's like the idea that you might be talking with some people, but you run into somebody else, and then you have another conversation. And like there's a different way that you can move in and out of groups. And that
mhm,
is not always as easy in this kind of Zoom sphere, where there's a kind of, we're here in a room, then we create another room, and there's a more fixed set of protocols there. But we thought it would be good to kind of almost take a moment. I mean, well, actually, can I, you know, I'm going to just break up the form for a second, Kalaija, or just throw in something. Because one of the things is that, like, one of the things I really miss, how many people here ever encountered karaoke, or sorry, jukeboxes at bars in their life? How many people are old enough for jukeboxes? Okay, like a lot of folks here. So I like, in general, in these kind of online spaces, I find if you sit for too long, or if you're kind of immobile looking at a screen, it's a bit too much. And so I always think every 40 minutes or so, one should probably like take a moment to move, or take a bio break, or whatever it is. And so I wanted to ask, does anybody imagine that we have like a virtual jukebox right now? Does anybody have a request for a song that they would like to put into a virtual jukebox right now? Put it into the chat. Hopefully not a 15-minute song, maybe more like a 3, 4, 5-minute song. Okay, It's Too Late by the Streets. I think, Zach, you've gotten it in. So I think I don't know It's Too Late, but I hope if it's okay for y'all, we'll put that in. In the meantime, what I also wanted to let you know while I'm getting that going is there is this collaborative collaborative present playlist that is what Emily and I have been using to collect a lot of recommendations for songs by guests on Present for the last several seasons. And we've now made it collaborative and opened it up as a Spotify playlist. So if anybody is interested, you can go to that playlist, you can like it, just click the heart, and then you can add songs to it. So if there's anything that you also would like to hear, you can throw that in there. I see Alan's comment about new urbanism, and I hear that for sure. So let's come back to that point in a moment, but let me cue up It's Too Late. Is that right?
mhm.
It's Too Late by the Streets. And give us all a moment to, if you like, stand up, move your body if you want, or stay seated, and or take a bio break. You can feel free, if you like, to also keep your camera on or turn it off, whatever makes sense. And I'm just gonna put on It's Too Late for all of us to take a quick moment. Okay, let's see if this works. Is that playing? I haven't heard this song in years. I do know this.
She said, meet me at the gates at 8. Leave now, don't be late. She said one day she'd walk away, cause I was always late. Thought things were okay. Didn't care though anyway. Say sorry babe, I had to meet a mate, tempting fate. We first met through a shared view. She loved me and I did too. It's now 7:50, getting ready, better be nifty. Do my hair quickly, step out, it's cloudy. Mate bells me to borrow money, I got 2 Henrys and a dealer to pay. Call up on geezers to rid these green trees of my reeking jeans. Got a you think I care, air out glaring geezer stairs. I'm here and I'm there. Couldn't see past the end of my beer. What was getting near, or the silence after the cheers. I didn't know it was over till it was too late, too late. But if I ever needed you, would you be there? She said meet me at the gates, don't be late. But pretty soon the day came for change, and I was glad she never walked away. So I'm choosing what to wear, doing my hair with an hour to spare. When my life went pear, she'd been there with a fixed stare. Big wheel climbed to the top, geezer stairs bounced off. Standing at the top of this huge mountain, smiling and shouting, spring flowers sprouting. Not 1 inch of doubt in my mind as I reached the gates. Came round the corner at a rate, risked her love but I was gonna set things straight. Never again am I gonna be late. Never again am I gonna be late. Never again am I gonna be late. I didn't know it was over till it was too late, too late. But if I ever needed you, would you be there? I said meet me at the gates. Leave now, don't be late. I waited for a while, listening to a voicemail, mind set sail. Then the facts turned me pale. Wind, rain and hail, my fears unveiled for my fair female. She'd walked away, too little too late. I step up the pace, walk past the gates, rain runs over my face. Spirit falls from grace. I purchase a hazy escape at the alcohol place in the chase. I sat down, got a fat frown, weeping and drowning my senses. For this love game's expensive. I walk in a trance, got a wounded soldier stance, and the everyday geezer stares throw me off balance. Now nothing holds significance, and nothing holds relevance, cause the only thing I can see is her elegance. I didn't know it was over till it was too late, too late. But if I ever needed you, would you be there? I didn't know it was over till it was too late, too late. But if I ever needed you, would you be there?
Okay, that was our musical interlude. Thank you for the jukebox radio. So I think we're back, and let's see. What I wanted to throw out are a handful of questions that might help to shape some of the conversations. So I'll say these, and then everyone can take a moment maybe and take a moment and like jot down some notes for yourself before we kind of separate out into these smaller groups. And so I'll put them in the chat as well. But the questions are: what is an example of a third place that you've encountered since the COVID-19 pandemic? And then the second question is, how have you found third places during the pandemic, or have you found them? And are there any specific characteristics of them? What makes them work online? And maybe the biggest question is just, what are you looking for in a community space now in this particular moment? So I'll copy those into the chat and maybe give everyone a moment just to like take a minute and jot down some notes for yourself on some of these questions and what motivates you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create 3 breakout rooms. And the idea is that we'll go into these rooms for about 30 minutes. And I'd recommend, for many of you who have done this before, it might be awkward at first, but I'll just offer some tips on maybe a protocol. And it might be that like everybody in the group can take a moment to briefly introduce themselves. They're small enough groups where that should be possible. And that maybe 2 people choose to play roles. One person can play the kind of loose host who makes sure everyone feels welcomed, who tries to make sure that everyone has time to share, and who kind of that person could be the host, and the second could be the kind of scribe, the person who kind of keeps track of the conversation and takes note of some of the big issues, questions, or points that come up. And when we rejoin, can share them with the larger group, what comes up in the conversation as bigger points. And as always, I'll just say, it's a great rule that if you feel, I'm one to be talking since I've been talking most of the time, sorry. Like if you see that you're the person who's talking the most, maybe take a moment to let other people talk. So maybe that's also a good sign for me to shut the hell up. And if you feel like it, you can always stay in the main room if this is not comfortable for you, but otherwise, I'm gonna open up the breakout rooms and then, we can all go in them for 30 minutes and then rejoin here and share what that was like. Does that sound okay? Okay, cool. Have fun and hope you all meet some new folks. Okay. Hey, Aaron. Let's see. Hi, everyone. Okay. Do we have everyone? Seems like maybe one. Okay. Hi, Kalaija. Okay.
Hello.
Okay, I think we're all back. So, cool. Well, I would encourage you again, if you like, to just take a moment to stretch, breathe, feel your body. I'm not going to be more formal than that, but it's always a good 40-minute Zoom protocol. Yeah, so I think, so we thought that, that if it made that maybe each group could share a little bit about the conversation, and we could just kind of we could do that and then open it up into a kind of larger conversation. Does anybody want to start?
Okay, I go. Group 3, jump in if you feel like adding something. From our conversation, what was quite interesting that came out was the idea of the third place as a moving space. As in the condition where there's no third place available to go to, then the third place moves with you. Like people meet and walk and talk and go on hikes, and the outdoor becomes more like a flexible third space. And then, so there's also this idea of not having undefined, how do you say it? Goal, it's always changing. Okay. And then a lot of people had found third places in online book clubs and Zoom meetings, and this also opened a chance for silent third places where you just share the presence through the camera, through the digital softwares. And then there was a very nice remark regarding the present series and how it created a third place where people could actually talk to each other compared to some openings or artist openings and galleries where people maybe stay in their own group or talk pretty superficially. And we talked about how talking on Zoom still feels a lot like performing a presentation, because you see yourself. It has a very different feeling of compared to a normal conversation. Yes.
Cool. Thank you so much, Eleonora. Great. Is there anybody else from any of the other groups who want us to share, or anybody who wants to add?
One thing that was really interesting, there were a lot of interesting points in our group, but we were talking about the lack of white noise from being in spaces together on online spaces, and we kind of shared YouTube white noise resources like coffee shop sounds, studio sounds. It's just some, I actually never thought about that or articulated that before, but it is a really different feeling to be working in silence all the time. We also talked about collaborating together. I learned about Miro for the first time, which I wish that I had used it all year, because like building a project with somebody virtually is really challenging, and I miss mind mapping with people in person, but I guess that there's an app for that.
As soon as you say that about the white noise, it's like, it's true. It's like there's just this emptiness between every speaker, but it's also the noise canceling algorithms of Zoom. I mean, actually, like, I wonder, can I suggest, like I've been doing this in my teaching now Emily and I've been doing this for a couple of months. We often encourage people, if they're able to, and their spaces aren't too loud, to just unmute themselves. We could all just unmute ourselves right now, and unless there's something really loud construction happening behind you, might change the feel a little bit.
Yeah. Taylor says the eeriness of seeing everyone laugh, but everyone is muted.
That's
So-
true.
Yes. My apologies. My cat forgets that he has a water dish and he screams for me to go turn the sink on, so you might be hearing him.
Yeah, we were talking about pets interrupting meetings earlier.
I think I met Lauren Klein from another Zoom third space from the hologram. Lauren?
Yes.
Hi.
Wait, I can't. I'm sorry. I'm on my phone, so I can't see who's speaking.
Okay, I'm Eleonora. Hi.
Hi.
It's fascinating. As soon as we unmuted, there's actually impromptu conversations happening.
It's kind of a barrier to unmute yourself. And it's like, oh, now it has to be super important what I'm going to say.
Oh, yes. Eleanor, I just found you. Yes, it's so good to see you. Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, stay muted unless speaking. Like that thing with the knowing when to speak in general.
Interruptions so frowned upon, and people overlap each other from lag all the time. And then everybody says, "Oh, sorry, no, you go." No, you go. And then there's silence. Nobody can figure it out.
Yeah.
I want interrupting to be a thing again.
Mm-hmm.
Real interrupting.
This is a really cool experience. I think this is the first time I've had the experience of being in, like you would meet somebody at a party, like, oh, I met you here. Like, this is the first time that's happened to me in a virtual space. I've seen people, but it's usually coordinated, or the path is very clearly linked. Like, so it's so cool.
I would say that's one of the successful attributes of a third place, is that there are regulars and different varying degrees of regulars too. So
Right. Do you know, I miss bar bathrooms. The ultimate third place.
The line to be tried. I was thinking about it before. The perfect third place.
So true.
Even unmuted, Zoom suppresses our background noise.
Well, I mean, there is a way to undo that. It can get noisy, but you can, in your preferences, you can turn on the original sound and it'll stop noise canceling. And it'll also allow it's in the audio preferences. You can allow yourself the checkbox to turn on original sound. I'm going to try it and see what happens. Maybe it changes what you all hear from my side. But yeah, because Zoom is really made to have one person speak at a time and have let's say a more hierarchical structure to a meeting, which I love what somebody said in the chat. Oh yeah, Emily said in the chat, can you imagine in a bar having to somebody has to press a button to say something?
Yeah, I think it would do for introverts though.
Yeah.
It's difficult sometimes when you start speaking and you realize that you're not being heard, but you think everybody can hear you and your mouth is moving, but actually there's another conversation happening. So that's kind of disconcerting as well. But we kind of move like a dance. But on that note, maybe I'll speak for our group because now I have the limelight. But just in terms of emotional connections, we talked about it in our group a little bit. I sort of thought that emotional connections are possible online, that we can read body language. But at the same time, I've had an experience through lockdowns happening in Dublin and then being lifted and meeting those people who you originally met online, and you know them more online, and suddenly you see things like their body language in a different way, or the way they walk, or the back of their head, or the way they talk to other people, and you see a different side to them. So we talked about those kind of isolated conversations, and other things that came up for us were things like the grocery store being the new third space, the parks and cafes, the accidental encounters that you would have there, and we consider those to be lo-fi. Some people found lo-fi interactions online to be more difficult. We also talked, Zach mentioned that maybe online forums, even places like Tinder, they're already functioning as a third space, and maybe we have to think about a fourth space, because we've, especially people in our group who are in rural areas, are used to being online quite a lot already. So that was interesting to think about what that might look like, and Zach mentioned Benjamin and the idea of aura and the phenomena of distance that surrounds each person, which I thought was really nice, and kind of came back to what we were saying about being online, and then what it's like when you see somebody in person, and the body kind of, the limitations you'd have online. Emily brought in the fact that the chat forums are actually a place where she can have emotional connections with people, which I thought was interesting, because that's through writing. So that was another space that I thought is worth mentioning. So, and then if anybody else wants to come in from our group, please do. The last thing I thought of was just maybe a sense of grief around some of the third spaces that we've had. While I'm also open to new spaces, I do still have a longing for that kind of that bodily connection where you're seeing people at less of a distance. But that's really all from our group, as far as I can tell from my transcribing today.
Touch.
Thank you.
I have a friend that mentioned that she saw a friend for the first time, and the first thing that she noticed was the smell of her shampoo, like that, like the smells being limited as much as the sounds, you know, brushing past people. Oh yeah.
Smell and touch.
Much as I hate it, I would kind of kill for
this, but yeah, you know, it's like, hi, caressing you now. Yeah.
I have to say that one of the things that I find still exists online is bumping into people who you don't expect to see.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would expect to see Prem and Kalaija here, but I didn't expect to see Mindy here, and I just saw Mindy in another call the other day. So I feel like it's the equivalent of running into somebody at another event, you know, that you wouldn't think that they're regular at, but maybe they are.
Yeah.
I'm curious how many of us ran into somebody today that they didn't expect to see here. Yeah, cool.
One thing that I would add is that it's always been nice to connect with people all over the world on the internet. So that's like an obvious and easy way to communicate with, especially people who have moved several places, and then you can keep in touch with friends like that. But we didn't have this kind of culture where you could join a group like this regularly. This kind of situation in which, like right now, what are we, 3 continents, 4 continents? It didn't normally happen. Every now and then, but not really. I mean, I guess video gaming, which I'm not interested in, and what else? Massive these educational programs. I guess those 2 situations, but I've never been involved in them. But like on a casual way, this is pretty unusual.
That's a good point to Adam with the Southland Institute was here but had to leave earlier, but we were talking in a separate conversation about time zones and how much more aware of time zones we are now because of this trying to gather. Like it expands it, but like I have a friend in Beijing and it's very impossible for him to come to any of the events that I do online because it's so late or early in the morning for him. Discord servers. Taylor, do you want to talk about what Discord servers?
Yeah, it was like within a week I got invited to like 3 new arts related Discord servers. One of them was The Human Way, but it functions for me. I think it functions like one of those like 2002 forums with different channels and things to talk about. And sometimes it's very overwhelming because there's like 12 different topics and like so many conversations going on. And I admit I'm lurking right now, but it's a new way to just kind of like jump in on a conversation, get to know people, and I've made some meaningful connections out of it too.
Yeah, it seems to be more popular than Slack.
Yeah.
And maybe it's like not associated with work.
Right.
Also, I want to add one thing about the how awkward of saying goodbye, like when people are Zooming, because I have the experience, like especially like last year, like when the Zoom is just popular, and also especially when there's less people, like for example 2 and 3 people in this room, and we kind of feeling embarrassed or about like how to say goodbye, because like in the physical space, like you two like maybe have so many emotional connections, like people are like be more away from each other, and this is like a sign that we are going to say goodbye. But in the Zoom, like we kind of lack of these signs, and we are always waiting for others to close the Zoom first. Yeah, so this is kind of the kind of embarrassed of say goodbye. Yeah.
I think that I've known Zach to try and stay to be the last person in a few Zoom rooms.
That's a practice that I've tried to keep up for my whole adult life, like lingering in classrooms after classes are done, lingering in auditoriums after lectures are done, because then, you know, then you could have a conversation with somebody at the end and maybe go out for a beer, which has happened quite a few times. I think that can also translate to Zoom too, because like, you know, when there are 50 people in a Zoom call and then you're left with like 5 people who haven't figured out where the leave room button is, then you're probably more likely to remember who those people are because they're so front and center at the end.
Yeah, there's the other thing about Zoom that's both wonderful and also challenging for me is what's happening right now, actually, where there's like really interesting stuff in the chat, and then there's also interesting stuff happening in real time, and like which conversation you enter. Maybe that is more authentic to the physical spaces.
It's just like passing notes,
Yeah.
or whispering to the person next to you, or having like if you're at a dinner table, there's maybe one big conversation going on, but then maybe there are like 3 minor conversations with people who are sitting right next to each other.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that I enjoy when I can spot that people are having private text chats during the Zoom. You can read that through body language sometimes, in the way that you would maybe like tell that 2 people had like snuck off to the corner to have a little aside.
I love that people brought up the the Quaker church, church as third place and Quaker society, because I personally love the Quakers for that language that they use around friends, the churchgoers being friends.
I'm also noticing, you know, I think that the Present series was some of the first, was really like the first community that I felt so like, oh, I must do that every Sunday morning. And that was towards the beginning of the pandemic. And now, of course, this is another session of that, and it's been almost a year. And I feel the energy so different. All of us as individuals have had these experiences in these places and rooms, these third spaces so much, and our interactions are changed. I feel like so much more relaxed. It's just we are acclimating in these ways at this point.
Yeah. I mean, thank you, Lauren, for that. I mean, in some ways, it also, I'll come clean and say, like, it's almost one of the reasons why I was so excited to organize this together with Kalaija was also because it is a year on. And it's like, what is it that we and need from a space like this? Or is a space like this still relevant? Or, what are the things that might, because it's true that like a year ago or in March of last year, it seemed like it was this immediate need. So many places were all in lockdown at the same time in some form or another. And that was a connector. Whereas now we have a totally different moment of the pandemic and things are so different in different places and people's relationship to themselves, to public spaces. And so anyways, I'll just put that out there as like almost my big question is like, what should Present become, or what are the things that any of you all would like to see in it or think would make it worth continuing?
I feel like the thing that is missing from it is so personalized to individuals and where they are and it's the only impossibility, or one of the impossibilities, is like a lack of it's not about neighborhoods. Like, we're creating our own community. It's online. There's several places that we're all coming together. We're seeing people with our regulars. Like, we're doing so many of the things, but the main thing is the neighborhood aspect that feels really different. And that's okay maybe, but we're supporting a different kind of community, like in arts, people who are into the same things, but are all over, like not fit local to each other.
I think that continuity is very important in whichever way, because this kind of bounds human beings to each other. You can't just live in a world where you don't know anybody, and every time you bump into new people continuously. I mean, I don't know whether this is possible to live. I'm literally rolling out the script for a fiction novel or something. I don't know whether this is actually socially or humanly possible,
I wonder if for those of us that manage to succeed in building and sustaining these like decentralized online communities, will also have to mourn the loss of them when we return to physical, because there might not be the incentive for me to come to this anymore when I can be doing something in person on a Sunday.
And I feel like this community kind of went through that when Berlin went back, right? Like, me and Prem kind of were like, okay, we're done for now. And then everything kept on, But
Now we're back to lockdown, so here we are.
Yeah.
I was really excited actually at the beginning of this pandemic because I've been involved in the net art world for a bit before this and been very interested in the internet and how people interact on it. And I mean, when I was in university, I talked about it all the time, and my peers all said, "What the heck are you dealing with the internet for? We don't want to be on the internet." And then I feel like this has been a real, I hate to use the word, but opportunity to really explore what can be done with the internet. And it's been very encouraging to see so many different people really learn how to engage with other people on the internet in a better way, or to do so in an expanded way. And I feel like I really worry that there's going to come a point when there is a chance to either leave the internet or remain in like a hybrid model of being both physical and online. And I think that there might be a tendency for people to just leave online immediately as soon as they get the chance to. But I think that does a disservice to the advancements that have really happened during this pandemic. I think people have learned to connect in such a different way, and humanity has really adapted to this. Even if we don't care to admit so, I think that all of us have learned to exist in such a new way that's never been experienced before in history. I think it'd be a shame to give that up completely.
I think it's not gonna disappear completely, because it's also what Miriam was saying. She lives now in an rural area and she misses some opportunities for discussion, and that's using the internet could be like it would still be needed to maybe create this kind of spaces. So yeah, I think more like a hybrid would stay.
I just hope that it stays intentional, and that people, that's one thing that we were talking about in our group, was sort of like when a space becomes a place, like when a park bench is no longer just a park bench, it becomes a gathering, a picnic meetup or gathering meetup. And I think that the internet should be used intentionally like that, rather than relying on algorithms like Instagram for our sort of social capital and connectivity, because that is also an element that Oldenburg talks about, is how the third place offers a different form of an economy, where he describes in the video that someone had a big tree that they needed help chopping down, and they were at the bar talking about it. So the other guy was like, I have a saw, and then went and helped him. And then he needed his car fixed, and somebody else from the gathering space knew how to do it. So I feel like that's one thing that I've really gained actually access to through this sort of like multi-continental exchange. Prem and I started collaborating this way, and I have a few other collaborations that have started this way. So hopefully we can keep that going.
And one parallel we could say is that in the sort of experimental music scene that I was active in when I was much younger, there were only like 5 people in each city that liked the same kind of stuff that we liked, and so you couldn't actually make a really big scene anywhere, and even in New York City. There might be 20 people who like that stuff in even the bigger cities, and so then you must do like a tour of some sort of informal way in order to make the scene consolidated in a meaningful way, to join with more people who like the same stuff. And so I feel this way about a lot of things, actually, that I've lived in large cities and I've lived in small cities, and I don't feel like it's really a big difference, actually, in meeting the people who you really connect with. There's maybe a slight more likelihood in Berlin or something, but not actually. So I think it's important to be intentional to try and find those people, and whether it's just like consumer preferences like music, or it's actually something more meaningful like socialism, or like to try and really find different solutions for larger issues. It's necessary, I think, to reach out and really be international about it, frankly.
Made me think of this one artist that I worked with that had this was pre-pandemic, but they are a net artist, and they are really into different codes and hacks and whatever, and they have this thing called the pipeline, which is like anytime they meet a person, they put them in this pipeline, get their contact information all in one place. And then they have like coded it so that if they send certain emails, they can like make sure that those people get the certain emails. And I'm not that organized, but it makes me think I should at least get a little bit more organized so that I can stay in touch with some of these faces in the little boxes on the screen. I don't know if anybody has tips, but I'm here for advice on that.
Well, I mean, that's probably also, in a way, the idea of staying in touch is also a good, maybe, I mean, we're starting to come to the end of the time together. We are not, maybe we should just be open like a bar and just be open 12 hours a day or something. But at the moment, we have time frames because we're still in this event model. But I wanted to maybe ask everyone to take a brief moment maybe and just reflect on, is there anything, like maybe like, is there one thing that you've taken away from today, or that is something that you'd like to kind of push forward or try out or use moving forward? Maybe just like take a brief moment, and if there's anything that comes to mind, put it into the chat, like something you've learned or taken away from the discussion today. Bye, Diana. Great to see you. Sorry, I'm reading some of the things in the chat. I love the idea of coffee shop white noise, just like running that as your entrance. Audio, yeah, there's a lot of audio and well, as you all know, we have some rituals here at Present. One of them that we don't always do, but I think we will do this time, is to end with a little bit of dancing. So I mean, but I want to follow the jukebox model for 1 second. We have one song that Kalaija has requested, which we'll end it with, but maybe, does anybody have a song that they want us to put on right now to bring us into dancing? Anything that y'all want to do? And I just realized I totally forgot. I'm mixing this up, but I should mention that in terms of staying in touch, sorry, see, this is the plug I totally forgot. In terms of staying in touch, as some of you may have noticed, I have this new like kind of newsletter structure. So using Substack. So if anybody wants to subscribe to that, that's where I'll keep people informed about upcoming presents and things about once a month. Yeah, so I'm seeing now, oh yeah, the virtual book club, the book fair. But so sorry, that was a confusing set of messages. Let me come back to thank you, everyone. Substack, Aaron, is a kind of, well, it's basically a kind of online publishing platform for newsletters and kind of communications, which there's lots of pros and cons of it, but I just decided to switch this year and test it out. But let's start with thank you, everyone. Thank you, Kalaija, for helping to organize this. Thank you, everyone, for joining and for opening up this time in your schedule to kind of think about and discuss community. I Don't know what will happen with Present Next, but I'm sure it will reappear in some form or another. And all of your generous thinking around this and sharing will help to think what's really needed in this time. And as I said, feel free to stay in touch with me. I'm going to also, probably all of you know this, but I'm putting my email in the chat, and prem@workshops.com. And so if you don't know how to find me, that's how you can find me. And otherwise, I encourage you to stay in touch with each other if you want. If any of you have met here and would like to continue the conversation, send each other a note and send your email to the other person, and who knows, maybe you can continue a dialogue in some other form. So with that, I'm gonna do this. I did some really confusing messaging around the music playlist. Why don't I put on your song, Kalaija? And then when that's done, if there's anybody still here who has another song that they want to put on, we can put that on and continue the dance party just a little bit. But if you have to leave, that's also fine. And I also encourage you to, if you feel more comfortable dancing without your video on, turn off your video and just listen and turn up the music. That's totally fine too. So any last words, Kalaija, Emily, or anybody else that you want to throw into the room while I get my tech set up?
I was going to say, Louise already has a It's All Right, Baby's Coming Back from Annie Lennox is also in the chat.
Okay, then there you go. Louisa, sorry, I missed that one. So you won. We're going to start with that, and then we'll come to another song.
Oh no, if we don't have time this time, we can go with Kalaija, and another time is good.
Come on, we've got time. We've got time. What are we doing? We're just here. We're in lockdown in Berlin. I mean, anybody can leave whenever they want, but we can play 2 songs. Let's do it. And again, there is the collaborative playlist. So I'll put that really quickly just in the chat too. If any of you want to add songs there, and see what else we've been listening to over the last many weeks, months, years. So
dance.
Okay. Dance. Okay. Oh! I haven't heard this in years!
It's all right, baby's coming back, and I don't really care where he's been. No, it's all right, baby's coming back, and I won't turn him around this time. No, no, no. I'll be your cliff, fall down from me. I'll be your leg, I'll be your big flowering tree. You can still depend on me, and I'll be taking off your clothes, and I'll be numbers on your wall, and I'll be your hands to stop the time. I'll even be your danger sign. It's alright, baby's coming back, and I don't really care where he's been. No.
Love the sunglasses, Zach. I know, this is like where we should all change our clothes and get into our third place kind of gear.
You increase your dignity, and I'll be unite your destiny, and I'll be your comfort and your ease. I will be your storm and seas, and I'll be your sharp and take up breath, and I'll be your work will take no rest. And when the world falls to decline, I'll be yours and you'll be mine. It's alright, baby's coming back, and I don't really care where he's been.
Oh my god, Ivan.
And I'll be your cliff, you can fall down from me. And I'll be your ledge, you can lean upon me. And I'll be your bridge, your flowering tree. You can still depend on me, and I'll be the ticket
The filters are coming out. I clearly need to install filters on my phone, on my computer. Okay, thank you for that great one, Louisa. And then we've got one more. If you want to stay over time, we got one more closing one from Kalaija. By Corona! Who knew that this was the perfect, most thematically appropriate song? Like Corona.
The mood. The mood.
Kalaija's get down though. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Yippee.
Yay, that was. I I've been at a dance party like that since lockdown 1. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. It's great to see you. Be well. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Prem. Thank you, Kalaija.
Thanks, Emily. Thank you, Kalaija. Thank you, everyone.
Talk soon.
Bye.